For as long as I can remember, I felt as though I was living under the shadow of my family. My name is Sarah. It transcended the typical sibling rivalry. No, it was something more subtle and more fundamental. Like I was invisible compared to my little sister Emily. I always felt like I didn't matter. Emily was the golden youngster growing up. She was the one who shone in all she did. Sports, academics, and relationships. My parents appeared unconcerned about who I was or what I did. The silent one, the one who kept in the background, striving nonstop to make them proud, but always failing. Whatever I accomplished, no matter how hard I worked, it never seemed sufficient. It didn't help that my parents never really tried to hide their preference. They lavished Emily with compliments, sent her to pricey summer camps, and discussed her future as though it were already fixed. She would be a lawyer, exactly as they had always imagined. But myself, I stood in for the backup, the one about which they had low expectations, one they would make do with. Years of striving to prove myself and get their acceptance defined me. In school, I put in more effort than anyone else. I volunteered my time to help others and performed all they requested of me. Still, it was inadequate. I was always in second position. Constant. One night then, I heard something that would turn everything around. Late from work, I had been home and happened to walk past my folks' room. Though I didn't intend to listen in, I couldn't help but hear the exchange. It concerned our futures, that of Emily and me. First, I heard the voice of my mother. We have chosen to cover Emily's law school expenses. She is capable of producing something of herself. We will make sure she has all she needs using all the savings we have accumulated over the years, the $500,000. My heart went down. Still, it was more than just the money that wounded. Their conversation regarding me was such that I was not even involved in the equation. Then my father spoke. Sarah, on the other hand, will be good. She's always been excellent in that waitressing job, so I'm sure she'll be delighted there. She does not demand the same kind of possibilities. I paused. $500,000 for Emily's future. The floor seemed to have been pulled out from beneath me. Me? I was meant to be behind a counter feeding people who didn't give me any thought. The awareness struck hard. My parents had never considered me as more than an afterthought. Their decision on my course of action was already clear-cut and not very unique. I left, unable to stay there anymore. Like my whole existence had been a lie. All these years of striving to be the decent daughter, the one who would bring pride, have been for nothing. It was about Emily, the ideal youngster, not about me at all, and I was not particularly like that. That evening I packed and headed off. I told no one where I was headed. I gave no thought at all. I refused to live in a place where I was not appreciated or where I was not personally seen in my own right. Though I knew I couldn't stay there, I was not sure where I was headed. I required room to ponder and to breathe. Perhaps this was a gift in disguise. Perhaps it was time to discover my own self free from continual pressure to be someone I wasn't. One question, though, kept chewing at me even as I drove away. Would they even know I had disappeared? The response was a straightforward no. None of them would. Emily would lead their universe, and they would just keep on. Me, the unseen one, receding ever farther into the background. And somehow, that wounded more than anything else. At least, though I was free, I lacked a plan once I left my parents' place. Where I was heading or what I should have done next eluded me. I realized I couldn't stay there, couldn't keep acting as though I was cool about being invisible in my own family. For a few days, I crashed at a friend's flat. It felt transient, something more, something that would enable me to really advance, was what I needed. That brought me back to Aunt Clara. Though she was my mother's greatest friend, Aunt Clara was not formally my aunt. But to me, she had always been the mother figure I knew I could rely on in trying circumstances. No one else had seen me, just as Aunt Clara had always seen me. She loved me, not about my marks or employment or anything else. Not sure if she would even remember me or if she would be too busy with her own life to give any thought. I contacted her. But her voice was kind and familiar when she answered the phone, as though not a year had passed at all. About the struggle with my parents, the way they had treated me my whole life, and how I had at last come to see that I was never going to be a top concern in their view, I told her everything. She listened attentively, her voice firm as she told me I wasn't alone. There was a protracted silence when I finished speaking. Then she said something that would fundamentally alter things. I have been waiting for you to call me. she added gently. I want to be here for you. One day I knew you would need help. She then related to me a secret she had been hiding for years, one my parents were unaware of. Aunt Clara had arranged a separate savings account for me when I was born. Knowing that one day I might need it, she had set aside money over years. She had never told anybody, not even my parents. She couldn't stand to let me leave without the same possibilities. She had seen the way they treated me, always placing Emily's future ahead of mine. She had maintained the account undercover just in case I ever needed a getaway. She was now presenting it to me, money to enable me to break free from the stifling grasp of my parents' expectations, pay for school, and create a future for myself. Emotions surged over me like a tsunami. It was about more than simply the money. It was about Aunt Clara believing in me when no one else did. She wanted me to have the opportunity to live my life on my terms, and sensed my potential. Aunt Clara gave me something far more priceless than mere financial support: freedom. She gave me a little packet, the weight of which more than matched the contents. Inside was my own personal savings kept aside for the account. I could use it any way I wanted, she assured me. Deciding how I would mold my destiny belonged to me. What to say was unknown to me. Overwhelmed with thanks, I just gave her a hug. Aunt Clara was odd, as I had always known, but today she was my lifeline. During the next few weeks, I decided I would visit college with this money. Before, I never had the chance to follow my aspirations. Today, I was going to do so. I set my major as business, how businesses were run, how they were organized, how they expanded, all of which piqued my curiosity always. Knowing that universe, I could design my own destiny free from the life my parents had sought to push onto me. I sensed control for the first time in my life. I was not living for someone else's expectations, first of all. Living for me was my purpose. Still, a part of me persisted in not letting go of the animosity and wrath I felt against my parents as I got ready to begin school. They seemed to have treated me as though my dreams were irrelevant. How might they have accomplished that? Given they had totally disregarded me, how could they have invested so much time and money in Emily? Still, I knew I couldn't pay that just now any attention. I have yet to create my own future, and I was planning to accomplish exactly that with Aunt Clara's support. The weight of my family's rejection started to lessen as I started to really sink into my studies. It was not gone totally. How could it be? Still, it became less important now. What counted was that I was forward-looking, self-serving, and I refused to let anything stop me. But then life sent another curveball, just as things appeared to be lining together. Out of nowhere one day I received a call from Aunt Clara. Her voice strained, and I knew right away something was wrong. With a faltering voice, "Sarah, there's something you need to know." I started to feel my gut slump. It was not good whatever she was about to say. "Your folks have behaved quite badly. And it concerns Emily," she said, her words slow and deliberate, as if she were attempting to digest them herself. I was on edge right away, my brain whirling. What had changed? What on earth could they have done right now? Emily's boyfriend Mark has been arrested. Bad, Sarah. Particularly terrible. And my world changed once more, exactly like that. I searched for myself for a few months following my departure from home. Working long hours at a nearby cafe, I moved into a tiny apartment and simply tried to make ends meet. Though it was not glitzy, it was mine. And the first time I felt like I was in charge of my own life. I was living free from the shadow of anyone else. I worked on myself using every free moment, reading, enrolling in online business classes, and trying to determine my future direction. Actually, I had no idea where I was going or what I was doing. But for the first time in years, I was not posing as someone I wasn't. Learning Sarah's true nature was helping me. A phone call then turned everything around. It was Aunt Clara, the older sister of Mother. She has always been the only person really looking out for me. When I was younger, I would frequently spend weekends at her house trying to get away from the stifling environment at home. Aunt Clara did not resemble my parents. Though no one else did, she believed in me. When she spoke, her voice shook. "Sarah, something has occurred. You must be aware of this." My stomach knelt under a knot of contraction. When Aunt Clara called in this manner, it was never good. Her voice cracking, "Emily's in trouble," she said. "Mark has been taken under arrest." Emily's name is all over the financial fraud probe underway. I sank down hard on the couch. Trying to make sense of what Aunt Clara was telling me, my thoughts flew. Emily's boyfriend was Mark, a pleasant man who always seemed to have a natural way with people. But he had never seemed to me anything more than a man attempting to ascend his path using all methods required. Wait, what do you mean, all over it? Struggling to keep my voice steady, I asked. The company he worked for lost roughly $10 million. He has been leveraging his contacts. Emily seemed to know about it but said nothing. These days, the FBI is involved, and your parents are selling the house to cover Emily's attorney bills. They believe they have her saved. I was hit with a frigid wave. This was the same sister everyone thought could never sin. She had always been on a pedestal. All of the ideal existence, the ideal future, was a lie. Sarah, I have no idea what to do. Guilt blinds your parents to see what is actually happening. Emily is afraid, and if we do nothing, I believe she will make a major error. She is phoning you. For a minute, I said nothing. The weight of Aunt Clara's comments sank in. Walking away from it all seemed natural at first. Emily had made her decisions. I had been the one left to pick up the fragments for so long. Why should I start helping her right now? She had always been the favored, the one without sinfulness. But when I considered it, I saw that supporting her meant advocating for what was right rather than only preserving her. I answered, my voice stiffer than I had expected. I'll talk to her. Emily phoned me the following day. Her voice quivered and was desperate. She continued, I messed up, Sarah, her words flying out in a rush. I didn't want to believe Mark was acting illegally, even though I knew he was. I wanted not to spoil everything. Now, though, it is too late. They say I participated and knew what was happening. I did not report it. My heart drew in. It was more than simply fraud. It was the image of Emily, the ideal daughter, at last losing appeal, her voice breaking. I don't know what to do, she said. Kindly, Sarah, I rely on your assistance. You will help me to ensure I avoid incarceration. You know Mom and Dad will do anything to save me anything. But after this, I am not sure if I can live with myself. I had a flash of rage. She was at last facing the results of her deeds. But where had this awareness been all these years? Emily had never had to deal with the disaster she produced. She had always lived in a beautiful bubble. Still, I was very depressed, even though I was furious. I understood this went beyond Emily now. This was about our family, about the falsehoods and deception we had been exposed to since early years. I said, listen, Emily, inhaling deeply, and then, I'll help you, but only if you pledge one thing. You have to be honest. There's no more lying. You're not pretending anymore. You have to come clean, not only for the authorities. You owe me. You owe yourself to face what you have done. You're not hiding anymore. On the other end of the line, there was a protracted stop. I'll do it. I'm going to tell the truth, and we agreed exactly like that. Deep down, though, I understood that guiding Emily would not be as straightforward as speaking the truth. Deeper levels to this were ones I neither knew either of us were ready for. Emily and I met 1 week later to confront our parents together. Though I had no idea what would happen, I knew this was the one moment that would determine our lives moving forward. And I understood something when I watched Emily sit there shaking with terror. She had become less of the ideal sister. Not one of us had everything worked out. She was exactly as lost at that instant as I had always felt. This started something far more than I had anticipated. The next month seemed to pass in a haze. Having never lived alone before, I was driven to create a life for myself free from depending on anyone else, even though I had no actual direction. That was not simple. I put in several jobs to cover my roof overhead. Like my father had advised, I started by waiting at a neighborhood diner. I did not allow it, nevertheless, define me. Working hard, saving whatever dollar I could, and beginning evening programs at a community college, I gradually worked toward a degree. I was not going to allow their demands to define me. Still, I couldn't avoid the draw of my past even as I created this little, autonomous life. Always there were the recollections of the way my parents handled Emily and of their priorities. Though I tried not to give them too much thought, they stayed at the rear of my consciousness. Then arrived the call that fundamentally changed everything. It was my mother's older sister, Aunt Clara. One person in my life who had never made me feel inadequate and who had always given me compassion was her Since Aunt Clara had never had children of her own, I felt something like her daughter. She had always helped me. She was the one checking on me when I left the house. She never condemned me for leaving. She realized things weren't right with my family. Aunt Clara panicked her call to me that day, her voice shaking. "Sarah, you have to come to the hospital. That relates to Emily." I dropped it right away and went to see her. When I got there, Aunt Clara was seated in the waiting area, appearing more worn out than I had ever seen. Her usually composed manner had changed to reflect anxiety. "Sarah, I didn't know how to tell you this," Aunt Clara said. "But Emily, she is in trouble. Mark, her boyfriend, has been taken under arrest for financial fraud. Even worse than that is her involvement. Her parents are selling the house to cover her legal bills. The authorities are looking at her." I was in astonishment. My golden kid sister, Emily, was involved in a scandal just now. It seemed implausible. I knew nothing about what to say. "Why is this taking place?" My voice just above a whisper, I asked. Aunt Clara cast sad glances at me. "Because Emily has spent a lot of time hiding something." Emily knew Mark had been running a phony company for years. She remained silent since she did not want to ruin her ideal life. And right now, everything is disintegrating. Trying to sort out what Aunt Clara had just said, I took a seat next to her. In my view, Emily had always been flawless. I did not know, though, how much I lacked knowledge of her life. Emily gave me calls as the days went by. She was ravenous. She acknowledged everything: how she knew Mark was a fraud, how she had ignored it since she wanted to keep the picture of the ideal life our parents had made for her. She pleaded with me to assist her, to testify before court, stating she was simply a victim as well. I ran, not knowing what to do. A part of me yearned to be the nice sister, the one who always had her back, to help her. But another side of me, that which had been wounded for so long, wanted nothing to do with her. She was paying the price after deciding her road forward. Still, something inside of me altered. I came to see I couldn't just leave her. She still remained my sister. Hence, I had to assist if there was any possibility of her turning things around. I phoned her back off and decided something. My voice calm. "I'll help you, Emily," I said. "Only then, though, if you are totally honest, there's no more lying. You have to own the things you did. You also have to quit acting as though everything is fine when it is not." Emily fell apart on the phone. She vowed to be honest and to stop hiding behind the ideal life our parents had created for her. She stated she wanted to be better and start over. It was not the Emily I had once praised, the ideal daughter incapable of sinning. Still, it was a positive direction step. Helping her meant something else, though, something I wasn't ready for. Deeper into the quagmire Emily had discovered herself in, as I investigated the matter, I came upon something even more startling, something that turned everything around. I discovered that my parents participated in all this not only as naive onlookers, they had been a component of it. Usually so rigid and moral in his views, my father was harboring a terrible secret. He had been assisting Mark on financial fraud, and they sought to cover their tracks using Emily as a pawn when the inquiry got underway. Emily had been coached. She was not merely a victim. Worse, however, for years my parents had been hiding their own illicit behavior using her. The truth struck me like several tons of bricks. Everything I had ever known, every belief I had about my parents, was a lie. Not only as kids, but also as tools in their own games of power and money, they had been using me and Emily. Though I was upset, I also remained cool. The truth was out. I had to decide whether to let this pass or grab hold of my own fate. I used the latter. I went up to my parents and insisted they own their behavior. Though they tried to ignore it, the data was clear. And in that instant, I understood I was no more the small daughter living under the shadow of their expectations. Right now, I was in control. I wasn't going to let them destroy Emily's life or mine. I issued an ultimatum. They could either come forward and deal with the fallout from their deeds, or I would see to it that the truth surfaced. That was the instant everything started to change. And although terrible, it felt like I was, at last, free. I thought it unbelievable when Aunt Clara told me about Emily. I knew my sister loved Mark, and I felt a nagging sense he wasn't exactly a positive influence on her. To learn, though, that he had been arrested for financial fraud, it lacked logic. How could Emily, always so conscious of her appearance, participate in something so sinister? Aunt Clara's voice faltered as she said Emily hadn't only been seeing Mark, She had turned a blind eye to his participation in a bogus financial plan, knowing about it but hoping it would all disappear. It was a full-fledged criminal activity, not only a small error. The authorities were now poring over everything, including Emily's part in the operation. Though I felt deceived and angered, of course, by Emily, there was also a weird pity in me. For so many years, I felt as though I was the outsider in my own family, as though my value was insufficient to earn the same care as Emily. Hearing this, though, I felt as though she was simply as lost as I had been. I wasn't sure if I ought to be furious or sorry for her. Emily obviously needed help, and as much as I wanted to remove myself from her and everything that came with her, I couldn't just turn my back on her totally, Aunt Clara concurred. Emily had contacted her. Sobbing and pleading for help, she informed me. She knew not where to go or what to do. She had become enmeshed in something so profound that revealing her personal involvement in the crime would not allow her out from under. One thing was clear, though. Emily would lose everything: her independence, her image, the family's support, should she fail to come clean or take ownership for her conduct. I made my decision at that point. Emily would be helped by me. One requirement would be present, though. I could not let her keep hiding behind lies and deception as she always did. I needed her to face the truth, to stop living in a fantasy in which everything was ideal. No matter how tough it might be, she had to own her acts. The following day, I called Emily. Her voice quivering, she sounded terrified and asked for aid. "Sarah, not sure what to do here. They are going to take me into custody." Her voice full of anxiety, she added, "I'm going to lose everything." Trying to keep my tone calm, I answered, "I'll help you." But inside I was boiling. "But only if you are truthful with everyone and with me. No more falsehoods. Give up acting as though everything is fine." A protracted silence preceded her next words. "I doubt my ability to do it. I have been lying for really some time. I have created this ideal existence and cannot simply toss it aside." I drew in a long breath. "Emily, you already have. But you have to start by being honest if you wish to correct something or set things right. Not only to myself, but to everyone. It's time to become woke from this fantasy you have been living." I understood she would not find this simple. For years, my parents had taught both of us that looks counted more than anything else. Actually, though, the truth was always messy, and something neither of us had ever quite been ready for. "I'll do it, Sarah," Emily answered, sounding demoralized. "I will share with them everything. I'll correct things." I knew, though, it was not the end. It went beyond just honesty. It was about rising to take ownership of what she had done. It was about divorcing the habits my parents had ingrained in us, patterns that had kept us both caught in this poisonous loop for so long. I hung up the phone and sat in quiet for some time, considering. Not just Emily was I concerned about, it was my parents as well. They had coordinated this whole catastrophe, and now they were trying to hide it by all means. I knew I couldn't permit them to get away with it. I had to face the reality about my parents if I were helping Emily as well. I couldn't keep living under their shadow, acting as though everything was in order. Once and for once, I had to start running my own life. I thus had to make decisions. I wasn't going to stand back and see how my parents steered their way out of this. I was supposed to defend what was right, and so they pursued the truth, even if it meant demolishing all they had created. I informed Emily what I intended to do when I gave her another call. We had to go up to Mom and Dad. We also have to help them to face their actions. She paused for a little instant. "Are you quite sure about this?" "I'm sure," I said, speaking deliberately. "This ends now." We both understood that would not be simple. At least, however, we were acting. At least we were beginning to take charge of our own destiny, rather than allowing our parents to make decisions for us. The scheme was laid out. We would face them, straight up everything, and demand responsibility. It was time to stop caring about their thumb. We were going to collectively undo our lives. I felt an emptiness not ready for me when Aunt Clara died. Her passing really affected me more than I had anticipated, since she had always been my rock, the one I could rely on without hesitation. Still, her last gift, the video she left behind, was what really rocked me. The movie was a revelation rather than only a farewell. Sitting in her old living room, the spot I had visited so many afternoons as a youngster, I watched the television as Aunt Clara's recognizable face emerged. Her voice was consistent despite the weakness that dogged her in her later years. "Sarah, Emily, if you're watching this, she said, her voice bearing weight I could feel across the screen. You know of things I have concealed from you for years. There are others you do not know. From their vantage point, your parents have always felt they transcend consequences. But they have been playing their games with you both as pawns, hiding their truths for far too long. The words feel to me like a strike to the gut. Though deep down I knew it to be true, Aunt Clara had always been direct. So hearing her talk about our parents' tactics was startling. She had spent years silently compiling proof while she watched my parents go on their show of respectability. I have evidence, she went on. Evidence of the financial crimes, company corruption involving your father, and his use of both of you to hide his mistakes. I wanted you to be free to choose for yourselves who you wanted to be, free from the influence of the decisions they took. Hence, I concealed this from you, but today, you have to know the truth. The movie continued, covering what Aunt Clara had found. Emails, records, and papers that clearly showed my parents' unlawful activity participation. Not only had Mark been controlling Emily, my own family was also under influence. Though it also made everything clearer, the disclosure was breathtaking. None of it had been about love, the way they had governed our life and made us believe we owed them everything, none of which reflected love. It had revolved around authority. I sat there silently, weighing all of it as the video came to a conclusion. Beside me, equally astonished, Emily's face was pallid as she struggled to absorb everything. The ground seemed to have been pulled from under us. Still, it also tasted like freedom. The truth was here to show. The lies were revealed. Emily said, her voice quivering, I have no idea what to do with all this. Knowing this moment would define everything, so I inhaled deeply. Right now we have options. We either let this break us or use it to rebuild everything. Emily fixed me with her eyes wide with doubt, but her expression changed. It was as though a curtain had been removed, and for the first time I considered her as an equal. Nowadays, she was not the ideal daughter. Not one of them had it all together. She was simply another person attempting to make sense of a disordered environment. We have to right this, I murmured, my voice firm. We must visit the authorities. We must hold them responsible for everyone they have harmed, as well as for what they have done to us. We decided together to turn everything over to the authorities. The FBI, who had been looking at Mark's scam, suddenly became curious about our parents' behavior too. Weeks of compiling the proof Aunt Clara left behind, Emily and I presented it in a way certain the truth would be revealed. The aftermath was disorganized. The media seized the narrative, and our parents' reputation fell apart. Although they tried to justify themselves, the facts were indisputable. They were detained. The government took over their company. Knowing we had contributed to what they had created felt strange as everything collapsed. Still, it was a form of justice as well. Regding Emily and myself, we headed forward. At last, able to carve out a life that was our own, we sold the company and made investments in our own destiny. We began with nothing, not depending on lies or expectations of others. I started my own company, and Emily discovered a fresh enthusiasm in helping those who had been victims of fraud and corruption despite her prior faults. The trip was not simple. There were days when we doubted whether we had done the right thing and worried whether we were starting to resemble our parents, driven by money and power. Then, though, I would recall Aunt Clara's words, "You have the power to choose who you become." I went with that as well. Based on integrity, honesty, and the hard-learned lessons, I am building something fresh, to take charge of my life free from definition from others. After their arrest, my parents never spoke to me anymore. They wrote letters and tried to get in touch via attorneys, but it was abundantly evident they were no more a part of my life. I was out of necessity for them. Emily and I developed a leaning on one another habit free from the weight of our past. Sometimes the toughest aspect of letting go is releasing the version of yourself caught in the lies as much as the ones who wounded you. Once you do, though, you come to see that the true freedom is in deciding who you want to be and creating a future you can be happy with. This marks the end of at least the story I used to tell myself. I am writing the next chapter, and for the first time I am doing it on my terms.